everyone. Thank you for being here. Big hello to Steve and to Billy as well. Steve, thank you for being here. I know it's early there, so very much appreciated.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here and good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. So for those who don't know, I met Steve at the Living Free Movement Festival last year in August, and his presentation on ether was absolutely spectacular. And so he was sort of like a no-brainer. We definitely needed to have him on for Lay Life Down. The one thing I love most about you, Steve, is that you're a nuclear physicist, which, academics spend a lot of time and effort getting into their positions, but you just absolutely tear it apart. So I know it takes a very long time to get to where you are. And now you've pulled it apart, pulled it to pieces, and you've actually decided that I guess I would describe you as a nuclear physicist come alchemist, because you're saying alchemy pretty much is the underpinning of all of it, and it explains everything so much better than physics.
Yes, I mean that's what I found when after I finished my PhD. So I never had a position in, as a professor or whatever. I did the PhD, and then after PhD, I just went into industry. But there's a certain status that you have in your mind, at least, having the PhD. You think you know it all, or you're clever or important. But when you actually step out of academia, depending on the subject of your PhD, you find that there's actually nothing you can do with it. And in my case, theoretical nuclear physics, I spent 6 months looking for jobs and found nothing. No one cared like about that I had a, a PhD in theoretical nuclear physics. It just wasn't useful. And so I ended up working in something totally unrelated to it for 5 years, just working on NFC payments, which are the contactless payments on your phone. So I was working on the early versions of that basically. But yeah, so coming out then, that's been over 20 years now since I graduated, and I just kept on seeking and trying to understand how things work, and eventually I came across alchemy, which I'd heard of from chemistry class. I remember our chemistry teacher telling us that chemistry came from alchemy, but the alchemists were just these kind of crazy old men who were trying to make gold in order to get rich quick, and that was about all they told us about alchemy. But when I started reading old alchemical books, I just found this just light of wisdom just radiating from these books. They're so well written, everything was so well understood. It was science, but it was also spirituality intertwined, combined. And I'd been sort of seeking that because I was coming from a scientific education, scientific background, not raised religious. So I was all in with science and scientism, but I sort of believed in like spirits and psychic phenomena and things like that. I was very interested in the paranormal. And I always thought it would be such an amazing discovery if a scientist would, discover evidence of spirit or evidence of the soul or evidence of God, let's say, that would be like a big deal. But actually, it doesn't work like that because if you're a scientist and you discover evidence of God or spirit or soul, then you just get kicked out of science
Yeah.
because science itself is actually an agenda to take you away from that stuff. It's literally spirit, soul, and God have been removed at the root level, and it's just not acceptable in science. So it was just really refreshing reading these old alchemy books and seeing that these alchemists were scientists, they were spiritual, they were, men of God, and they had a complete understanding of nature. So yeah, I just became obsessed with it, just reading all the time and trying to apply that to my life and see how it relates with modern science.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I was watching something of yours yesterday, and you were basically explaining that the Venetian oligarchs were opposed to the scientific discovery and wanted to remove the human soul from human knowledge. And that was like an aha moment for me as well. I know that to be true because of the way that I grew up. I basically grew up in the rabbit hole, but I didn't understand where it actually originated from. So can you talk to that for a couple of minutes? Who are the Venetians? Why did they want to
Uh,
get rid of God?
yes, yes. Let me see if I've got a slide on that. I'm sure I do somewhere. Where is it? Where is it? There we go. I'll just share the screen. So I don't have a prepared presentation, but I do have a lot of slides that I can reference as part of our conversation. So,
Awesome.
um, yeah, so the Venetian conspiracy, I learned about this to a guy called Webster Tarpley, and he explains that the Roman Empire had this Venetian oligarchy. It was basically centered in Venice, The center of power was in Venice, but it moved its base of operations from Venice to London over several hundred years between like 1200 to 1600, and basically became the British Empire. And there's this quote that every Briton is now a citizen of the new Rome. And yeah, so the idea was this Venetian oligarchy that they sought to control what people think, particularly in regard to science and philosophy, and to control how the masses respond to world events. They fervently believed that the human being has no living soul, no immaterial substance, so no spiritual substances, and no creative mental powers, and is thus incapable of forming hypotheses or making real scientific discoveries. Now, there's a couple of quotes from Webster Tarpley I had to quote because I think they're just brilliant. The Venetian party are implacably hostile to scientific discovery. Since the days of Aristotle, they've attempted to suffocate scientific discovery by using formalism and the fetishism of authoritative professional opinion. So formalism, this is like when we go to study physics, for example, it's all formal mathematics. And you're basically just drowning in formalism constantly with all these like complex equations and all these rules that you're just navigating. And it can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people. It can make the whole science just inaccessible to people because they just see all these big equations and everything and they're just overwhelmed. But then there's also this fetishism of authority. So like Einstein, Newton, and Hawking, even like people have this sort of like fetish, like idolizing relationship with scientists, um, and that's of course not really scientific. So throughout the 15 and 1600s, they changed their image from being the enemies of science to being the embodiment of the most advanced and sophisticated science. So this was like a rebranding. So while they were openly just opposed to all science, it wasn't working for them. So they rebranded themselves as the masters of the most advanced and sophisticated science. And that was basically what we have now: mathematical hypotheses, number and measure, cold rational materialism, absent of soul, spirit, and creator. That's what they defined as the most advanced science.
Wow.
So they also created over the years a series of scientific frauds and hoaxes, which he called bogus shams that have been elevated to the status of incontrovertible and unchallengeable authorities. So, yeah, as I understand it, the Venetian party kind of went on to become like the East India Company, this
Wow.
kind of thing, like a
Yeah.
big force in the development of the West, and yeah, like really opposed to science in every way. And another another thread that led back to this Venetian conspiracy was when I looked into the anti-nuclear movement. So the anti-nuclear movement, which of course with the understanding of nuclear we're given at school, nuclear is bad, it's radioactive, it's toxic, it's dangerous, it can, all this. But I found that actually a lot of that's just propaganda, and it's not actually as dangerous and as bad as people have said. But there's a conspiracy against nuclear coming from the Venetian level, from the East India Company kind of level, because they don't want people having access to cheap electricity and cheap power, like because it empowers us. So they don't want us having like advanced technology, like lots of energy, lots of scientific discoveries, because it would empower us against them. So they have to keep us at a certain level of knowledge and power. So I think that's really the root of this whole kind of anti-science conspiracy. It goes back a long way.
It's very interesting what you first were saying, that they believed that humans weren't intelligent enough to understand science or something along those lines. Is there any, I know this is a bit out there, but is there any contention that they perhaps weren't fully human? Because it's a pretty weird premise to
Well,
come up with.
yeah, that there could be. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, this sort of mentality of looking upon the human race as just kind of like subhuman animals or
Yeah.
whatever does appear to be perhaps a condition of a non-human entity.
Well, yeah, because the bloodline families obviously feel that they are above, well above us, and there's lots of talk about where did Rh negative blood come from? Yeah, just very interesting. Billy, did you have a question before I jump in with another one? I always do this.
Well, maybe
Yeah, no, you
can I
go,
just
because mine's a bit different.
Okay, all
go
right.
for it? Yeah.
So
I was going to maybe ask you to elaborate on the blood thing there, if you don't mind, just because
yeah, yeah,
we had this came up recently. I was at an event, and it seemed all the people who were getting bitten by mosquitoes had type O blood.
yeah.
And I don't know, we couldn't figure out
It is.
why, but
Well, it's really interesting. So people or families with Rh negative blood tend to have elite bloodline going way back. So I don't
okay.
have Rh negative blood, but my father did, and other members of my family do. And we went back to the Kennedy line, which is one of the 13 Illuminati bloodline families. And so it's very strange that there's these certain family lines that seem to run things, your Rothschilds, the Bilderbergs, and all these very, very difficult, horrible people that, like the Venetians, obviously, see the rest of humanity as subhuman, which is quite bizarre. So I've been trying to piece it together, obviously, because I'm part of one of those lines, and I've there was a lot of abuse in my family and a lot of really weird behaviors, ritualistic behaviors. There just seems to be this belief that there's a difference. And I don't think it's just coming from elitism or eugenics specifically, as in, these are infantile individuals who think that they have to have power to be in control, means everything to them. I think it's bigger than that. I think that there's different kinds of people. It's not just different kinds of races. There's different kinds of, it's hard, there's the talk of reptilians and all sorts of really, interesting things going on, which, the Hopi Indians think that there were reptilians in the Grand Canyon, this 10,000-year-old belief system, and it just goes across the whole world.
Yeah, and I think as well as like people who've like carried on their legacy or their tradition for hundreds or thousands of years, like are going to have a completely different consciousness from people like myself who are just born, you're just born in the world, not really knowing where you came from, not knowing anything past my grandparents, as to where I came from or whatever. But they're obviously families that they keep everything within the family from generation to generation. They build the wealth over and over for thousands of years potentially, and yeah, they're going to have a completely different view of humanity from the rest of us.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and we could talk about it forever. I work as a psychic, so my frustration with my profession is that it's denigrated. And when you were talking about, alchemy being, it's one of the soulful sciences, and it's just been pretty much eradicated. And yet you can talk about alchemy. You've got a YouTube channel, and it does quite well. So, how would you explain that? Is it because people are so convinced that it's just rubbish?
Well, yeah, I've thought about this because when I first started reading alchemy books, one of the first things you'll notice, I'm talking about books from like the 16 or 1700s. They always talk about how it's a secret art and you shouldn't talk about it, right? Because it basically it was dangerous at that time to go around talking about alchemy or to openly practice alchemy was dangerous. You could get in trouble from the monarchy basically, or from the Catholic Church, from the Romans. They didn't want it, and they say this was all to do with like production of gold. So they didn't want people practicing alchemy in case they were able to make gold, and then that would devalue the gold that was being used for currency through mining and stuff. But I think it may be deeper than that. But we know now a lot of palaces, like kings and queens, actually had alchemists like working under them and stuff. But again, so this is we're going back like 300-400 years. So I'm reading this stuff in like 2015, 2016, and I'm like, all right, I better not talk about this. This is like a secret. I better respect, the alchemists and not talk about it. But then, as time went on, I'm just like, no, this needs to be talked about. It's like, it's just basic natural science, like for the most part. I mean, it can seem very cryptic and the way it's written, and it's very artistic and stuff as well. But it's really pointing to like fundamental natural science. And, so as someone who went to university specifically to learn fundamental natural science, like I'm kind of passionate that that is something that we deserve. It's like our birthright is to understand the natural world and how it works. And I think the alchemists have a better understanding. So yeah, I was cautious at first about talking about it, and then eventually started talking about it, and eventually wrote a book about it. And the book's been quite successful. And now there's actually loads of alchemy channels on YouTube, loads of great alchemy documentaries, and old books being digitized and everything. And I've never seen a single thing about alchemy get censored ever. Like
Wow.
literally not a single thing. And so I just don't think we live in the same time now as those alchemists did in the 16th, 17th century. There's an opportunity to revive an ancient science here, and we're not getting attacked by the king or the pope or whatever for talking about it. So, so I say let's just go for it. Um,
Could you describe to us the significance of ether?
yeah, well, it's really very significant, and it was removed from science deliberately around about 130 years ago, like just before the beginning of the 19th century. I think 1887, they did the Michelson-Morley experiment, and I won't go too much into the details of the experiment. It's a bit long-winded, but essentially they set up an experiment to detect what they call the ether wind. So they expected that there was an ether wind, like just like an air wind, but more subtle. And they set up an experiment with light beams in order to detect this wind. Now, in the end, they claimed that they didn't detect it, and they concluded that the ether does not exist.
Wow.
Now, and this was based on the assumption that the Earth is spinning and moving through space at 66,000 miles an hour. So they didn't question that. They held that belief, and they declared that the ether doesn't exist. But prior to that, ether was common knowledge. I mean, it was actually such common knowledge that they set up an experiment to measure it without really, thinking that it doesn't exist. It was just it was known to exist. But they kind of inverted the results of that experiment, and then basically there was that, and there was a whole series of other things that really pushed to get ether out of science. And Einstein was a big part of this.
Mm.
So they removed ether from science and then essentially replaced it with Einstein's theory of special relativity, because this was the only theory that was able to explain Michelson-Morley without resorting to ether. So it was kind of like a switcheroo. They took ether out of science, and then they brought Einstein in, and then all of modern science, the last 100 odd years of science, is all based on Einstein's work.
Yeah.
And I've talked about how Einstein actually means one stone or first stone.
Yeah.
And I think this is a symbolic name of the foundation stone for the new science. So Einstein was used as the foundation stone or the cornerstone of this new science, this post-ether science. So, excuse me. Yeah, so why did they want the ether out of science? Well, it's essentially a scientific concept that bridges science and spirituality, because it's a spiritual substance. What does that mean? Well, it's substantial, but it's able to penetrate all things.
Yeah,
That's
right.
what the alchemist tells. The ether can penetrate all things, all materials. Us, not around us. Like the air would flow around us, but the ether flows through us, flows through everything. And so it's a spiritual substance. And actually, Isaac Newton said that he thought it was the sensorium of God. So that the ether was essentially the medium through which the divine expresses itself into physical reality. So it really is the bridge. It's the bridge between material science and spiritual science. And so they really had to strategically remove that if they were going to create a purely materialistic science. And it's not obvious when you're learning the science. You just take it all in and get on to the next thing and pass the exams and yada yada. But when you then distance yourself from science, you start looking into the history of it and the veracity of these claims. It's clear that there was just like a whole agenda to, you know, rebrand science and remove ether from it completely. And then, of course, alchemy was hidden and discredited as a sort of pseudoscientific medieval attempt to make gold from lead. Um, yeah.
Which, I mean, that could be like a metaphor for, growth on a soul level as well, because, we come in and we learn and we get to higher and higher frequencies. And I always thought that might have been, the real reason or the real meaning for that,
It
transmutation of
is. Yeah.
materials. Yeah, yeah,
It,
yeah.
it absolutely is. Yeah, yeah. So so the word metal, there's also a variation which is mettle, metal,
Oh, yeah.
which is you you talk about a human being having metal, right? So, and it's this your metal is like your resilience and your strength, like your faith, like how well defended you are. So you develop your metal, your leaden self is like the self that you come into the world as, and then your golden self is after your personal transformation, after your healing, after your growth. And so yeah, so lead into gold is very much about personal transformation and awakening. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious because of you got a question?
No, no, you go. I'll
Oh,
wait.
sorry, Tom. Obviously, we love ley lines. That's why we have this movement. It's my belief that the ley lines are actually the repository for akashic information, which is past, present, and future, all the events that have occurred on Earth, all thoughts, all everything that's going to happen, will happen and is happening. I heard or I read that there's this guy in Selma in America in 1854. His name was Orion Williamson, which is very interesting. That you obviously know about spellcasting. Anyway, he just disappeared in front of a whole bunch of people. And then his voice could be heard for weeks afterwards calling out. So from my understanding of portals, the crossing point of ley lines, I believe that he walked into a portal space and translocated and just couldn't get back. Now, Aristotle had described that as a form of ether, that he, that might have been, or sorry, that there was somebody who was trying to explain how that would happen and used Aristotle's theory that it would had something to do with, going into the ether. So is there any connection between ether perhaps and ley lines or earth energy lines?
Um, yes, I mean, well, I didn't know much about ley lines. I'd obviously heard of them a bit, but when I saw your presentation at Living Free, I was blown away. It was so interesting, and yeah, it made a lot of sense. And I suppose the way I would think about them in an alchemical sense is like rivers of ether. So you get these like flows of ether, like they say, like b before a river, before a river of water flows, there'll be a river of ether, like blazing the trail, right? So it's like it's our um, it's like a pre-flow, like the ether starts flowing, and then when it becomes stable enough, there'll be like a water flow, or maybe people will start walking in that direction. It's like a favorable, like energetic path, or sort of path of least resistance in the structure of the ether itself. That would be how I would understand it. But the question of portals is definitely more complex, and I don't have a simple explanation for how someone can just disappear into the ether. But I did I did have a conversation with a lady recently called Emily Moyer. Do you know her? She was
No.
talking about portals in Austin, Texas. There's a lake there called Ladybird Lake, and she's lived there for a lot of years. And people were going missing, and like people were coming out of the lake like confused, in a suit and everything, just coming out the lake soaking wet, totally confused, not knowing where they are and things like that. Whole load of stuff, like over like 27 years, like loads of weird stuff. And I thought I'll look into this. Let's look into see if there's anything like this in Scotland, because we have 31,000 lochs, right, which are basically lakes, like the Scottish word for lake. They're all over the place, and so I did a bit of research, and then I found like lots of these lochs were described as portals, and
Wow.
the yeah, yeah. So there's said to be these elemental spirits called the fair folk, or the fairies. They're said to live inside of the mountains, and there's a lot of lore about this going back. But the lochs are said to be portals where you can access their world. And there's even time dilation. They say like one day in the fairy world could be like decades of time, or hundreds of years in our world. And there's even an old story about two young boys who went missing. They went away playing in the mountains. They went missing, and they turned up 100 years later, the same age, and they still had their sandwiches. Their sandwiches were still fresh from
Wow.
100 years earlier, and the people in the village were just, yeah. So there's a whole story about that, and lots of stories about other lochs being portals into the fairy world, and these water horses that are said to appear to guide people over to the other side and things. So
Wow.
so I mean, this is all kind of new to me, and it's not easy to explain in scientific or alchemical terms, but it's quite amazing. So
That's really cool. So the locks are very similar to fairy circles because people will supposedly get, lured into a fairy circle by a fairy, and then they disappear, and they might only be, gone for a few days and come back, and everybody's dead that they know, and it's been a very long time has passed. What's really interesting what you're saying about the Lochs is you've got Nessie, obviously everybody's heard of Loch Ness and the Nessie monster. Cryptids are very well reported or often reported around portals. So where you have these crossing points of ley lines, I mean, clearly I know people who've translocated who've gone to a certain location, it's a portal spot, and they can go to a different country. I know a couple of people now have told me that. So it seems to me like there's off worlds, there's other places, lands perhaps on the planet that us plebs aren't supposed to know about. But also you'll see your cryptid type entities, your yetis and bigfoots and those sorts of things, either when you're looking into a portal or you're actually standing in the portal yourself and you're actually in another world. And this stuff, this is fascinating stuff. This makes sense of all the myths and legends that we hear. But of course, there's academia that says, and psychiatry that says this is all crazy. I'm not allowed to talk about it. So obviously now, I mean, I've heard you sort of talking in some of your talks about how now that the world has been turned upside down because everybody had to have one of these things in the arm, otherwise they'd lose their job. We all realise that academia is a lot of it is myth and legend of its own. It's not real. It's fake, and it's about control structure. So, I mean, we need a science of consciousness. That's what we've been looking for. And I think from watching you and listening to you, I'm getting a bit of an understanding that alchemy was that science of consciousness, and it's been basically taken away.
yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they had this thing, the hard problem of consciousness, they call it in science, which is essentially a statement that they don't understand consciousness, and it's hard. But yeah, of course, if you're a materialist, understanding consciousness is incredibly hard. The Venetians would have said that your consciousness is made from atoms, right? Your mind is made from atoms, your soul is made from atoms. Like everything is just atoms, and when you die, it all just falls apart, and then none of it exists anymore. So yeah, it's a complete denial of the non-material or finer spiritual substances existing in nature. And yeah, I think the fairies or the fair folk, or people would call them the good folk because they didn't want to upset them, right? So they would call them the good folk because they were so afraid of upsetting them, because they can really mess things up for you, and they can be quite cruel and stuff. They have a whole different set of laws and everything from what we do. So yeah, and you mentioned the fairy circle. I've actually seen one out the back of my house about 4 years ago. I have a video of it. My daughter and I were out, and we found a perfect ring of mushrooms growing around a tree. It was so, and I didn't know they were called fairy circles at that time. I
Yeah,
was just like,
well,
how the hell did this happen? But apparently they say it's where they were dancing. They dance around the tree, and then that causes the mushrooms to grow in a perfect circle around the tree. So yeah, I feel like they are around here. They're said to live inside the hills and the mounds. They're sometimes called the people of the mounds, and we have plenty of mounds around here. That's for sure.
oh, that's fascinating in itself because a lot of the mounds are built up because they're actually trying to get, because the portals sometimes are above ground. So a lot of the mounds are built, and they do have things inside them. There's also ritualized reasons for having them, but a lot of them actually are built up so that they can reach the portal space that's above ground. It's just fascinating.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah.
So the portal then would be, you think, like an ether vortex, an energy vortex
Crossing
that
point of Earth energy lines, and it's a concentration. So it's not just a translocation device. These spaces, I mean, to point out how important they are, we've got crazy people that, I don't know if the Venetians were Satanists, but it sounds a bit like it because who wants to get rid of God? It's only those that are absolutely opposed to God that, they might be trying to convince everybody that God doesn't exist for a reason because they have a God of their own. So a lot of the really bad behavior that occurs in these crossing point of ley lines, it occurs outside because those crossing points are so significant. So, and that risks, I'm talking really hideous behavior, that risks, being caught, being found out, and that often happens in the solstices and equinoxes when all of these ley lines and earth energy lines would come into into harmony time. We came into permanent harmony time at the end of 2024. So that shows how important it is to people who are powerful that they'll go to all of that effort. I think I know I've only just scratched the surface with ley lines. It just blows my mind. I've got so much to learn. Yeah.
yeah, I was just let me show you something here. Let me just get the screen on here. This is just interesting. Just something I learned a few weeks ago. uh, this painting here is called the Riders of the Sidhe. So that word Sidhe is actually pronounced she in Gaelic. And this is in the McManus Gallery in Dundee, which is just just over the water from where I am now. And we were there and we saw it, and it's not a very good image, but it's a beautiful painting. It's huge. It's hanging in the gallery, and it depicts the king and queen of the fairies riding over the Sid Laws, which is the name of the hills over there. Sid Laws, like as in Sidhe. And apparently, this happens on solstices and equinoxes. They come out of hiding and they ride across the mountains, and they can be seen at certain times of day on the solstices and equinoxes. And also, apparently, the entrances to the mountains open up on solstices and equinoxes and then close. That's what I found out from looking into this painting. So
Oh, that is amazing. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, it just, when you get that sense, there's just this whole like reality world that you've just never thought about, never heard of, but it's starting to seem really real now. Yeah.
What do you make of the fact that all of this is sort of coming to light now? Like you were saying, people can learn about alchemy and nobody's trying to stop them. Psychics are all over the place talking about their stuff. People are talking about all sorts of interesting things now. What do you make of
Yeah.
that?
I know it's strange, isn't it? Because on the one hand, when you look out to the world, it seems like everything is going to shit and everything's evil and it's all, satanic pedophiles.
Yeah.
That's how it seems when you look out. But sometimes it's not easy to see ourselves, like the fact that we are waking up, we're becoming stronger, we have more access to knowledge, more access to information. It's like, and perhaps the reason why things seem so bad is because our light is getting brighter. So we're shining more of a light into the darkness. So from our perspective, yeah, it looks like things are really bad, but um, we are the light. So it's going to look bad when you're a light shining in the darkness. But when you look to other lights, other people who are shining a light and so on, then it gives you hope. You're like, wow, people are amazing, the world is amazing, things are getting better. But when you just look to the dark, it just seems like things are getting worse. And so I think we have more power now as individuals than we probably ever have. And the technology is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can be used for control and surveillance. But on the other hand, it greatly empowers the individual who's prepared to use it. So yeah, I see it like literally like a double-edged sword. It's like the enemy will use computers, but we also have to use computers. Like the lightsaber, right? It's like the bad guy uses a lightsaber and the good guy uses a lightsaber because that's the technology that's like the battlefield. That's how we battle in this day and age. Swords are useless, right? There would be a time when people had to fight with swords and had to carry swords, but in this age, swords are completely useless. Like, what are we going to do? Go around like stabbing each other with swords? It's ridiculous. Like, we use words, we use logic and truth and, video and audio, and like this is the new battlefield as I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I actually see, I'm a painfully optimistic person. I say painfully because I get harassed for it, but I really do believe that things are shifting and getting a lot better. Speaking about the battlefield, I did want to ask because I was watching your presentation on your YouTube channel about nuclear power, and it just blew my mind because yellow cake and sulfur do look identical. So
Yeah.
could you talk to that for a few minutes? Because I think people need to know that, it sounds to me like it was pretty much a hoax so that chemical weapons could be used.
Sure. Yeah. Let me get this one here. I'll get the screen share again. And we'll get to the yellow cake thing. So, oops, make that bigger. You'll see that fine, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So look, I came out of a PhD in nuclear physics and could quite honestly tell you I had no idea how to build a nuclear bomb or how to build a nuclear power station. Like, absolutely no idea. And you'd think as an expert in nuclear theory that I would know how to do that, but of course, theory and practice are not the same thing. So I was very familiar with the theory of how a uranium atom can be split with a neutron and break apart and split the other atoms, and this can create a chain reaction and release all this energy, yada yada. I was very familiar with all that and the mathematics of it and how all that works. But in practice, how do you do it? Not a clue. So I came out, I wanted to look at this. I was always under the impression that they used uranium in, I thought they used uranium in the bombs and uranium in the power station, because that's what we're told. Now, uranium is a metal. That image there with the metal disc with the number on it is allegedly a piece of uranium metal. So I was really surprised when I learned they don't use uranium in nuclear power stations or the bombs. They use something called yellow cake, which they tell us is uranium oxide. Now, they can call it uranium oxide all they want, but how do you prove it's uranium oxide? It's not so easy, right? So what it actually is, it's from an ore called pitchblende, which is this sort of yellowish rock. They break it down, purify it, they extract that yellowish substance, and they pack it into these little pellets, these little metallic pellets, and then they put it into the nuclear assembly, and then they ignite it somehow so that the yellow cake begins releasing heat through the pellets into the water, which then generates the steam and drives the turbines. Now, this idea of nuclear energy is really, it's about solar fire trapped in matter. And they even tell us this in mainstream science, because they tell you that the sun is a nuclear reactor. Therefore, if you create a nuclear reactor on Earth, you're unleashing the energy of the sun. See, it's like they're sort of telling you it in a roundabout way. But in alchemy, there's the sulfur principle, which is sulfur is sol fire, like the fire of the sun. It's energy in matter. Now, in chemistry, we're conditioned to believe that sulfur is just a chemical on the periodic table. But in alchemy, it's not a chemical, it's a principle. So any substance which has solar fire stored inside of it is technically sulfur. So I was looking into this yellow cake, and it occurred to me that it looks virtually identical to sulfur. So on the left there at the bottom is sulfur. No, sorry, yellow cake, and then on the right is sulfur. Right, it's just two pictures. I mean, they're virtually indistinguishable from each other. And so it was a bit of an aha moment when I realized this. I'll skip through here a bit. Yeah, so I realized sulfur is really the key to understanding the whole entire thing, because it's about the fiery energy in combination with matter. So really any type of fuel, anything that's used for combustion or explosions or corrosion, like sulfuric acid, like always has sulfur in it. It's called brimstone, burning stone, or the devil's gold. It's found in volcanoes, obviously, which is the fire and the earth element combined, right? So to get the fire in the earth, it happens in volcanoes. It's found in oil, petroleum, natural gas, gunpowder, egg yolks, right? It's yellow like the sun, like the solar plexus, looks exactly like yellow cake, and is also the active component of napalm and mustard gas. And this was interesting because this guy, Michael Palmer, found in his investigation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that they actually used napalm and mustard gas in the bombs instead of the uranium and plutonium that we were told. So yeah, so sulfur then became just like the key principle that just tied together all of it really. And so this was a big, yeah, it was definitely a big uh, wake up for me when I realized that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And I realized just then I've asked you a question and it's taken you an hour and a half presentation to answer that on your YouTube channel. That's a pretty rude question to ask, but it made so much sense. So I'm going to link the particular video under this chat because obviously I grew up in the 70s and 80s and all we got was nuclear this and nuclear that. And we're all going to die in a nuclear war. And that was what they used back then. And it was horrible. And once
Mm,
I've watched your talk, I mean, I don't really particularly want to be mustard gassed or had napalm thrown over me, but it doesn't mean the end of the world, does it? It's just, and this is the evil that we have to deal with. We get fed so much rubbish, and they really do believe that we're so stupid we won't be able to work it out. So this is
yeah.
where, people like yourself who, even though you're treated like a god as an academic, when you've got a PhD, you get treated, you're lauded. You've thrown all that away and you've said, actually, so you're obviously smart enough to work it out, that this is not the case. And you're sharing that, which is fantastic and really important. So, I laud you for that. That's
Oh,
brilliant.
yeah, no,
Um,
I definitely wasn't lauded after my PhD. It was literally just I was just out of the system, like in the real world, trying to figure out how I'm going to make it. It's like, but you think, in your mind, I mean, if you stay in academia, certainly you will be lauded and, there's like promotion opportunities and stuff. But once you leave, yeah, it's pretty hard to, it's that whole thing of like creating value. So like when I quit my job to do music, I had to make good music and go and play gigs. Like I had to provide value for people in order to survive. But academics don't have to do that, right? They don't. There's no market pressure or business pressure for them to create something of value in order for them to survive. Like virologists, like vaccinologists, physicists, like all these like researchers, they survive on funding.
yeah,
They don't survive based on their market value. And so that's a problem in and of itself. So yeah, so because I put myself out there, I'm just like quit my job. I'm like I'm gonna just make myself of value to the world. I know what that takes, and I can look now at scientists in academia. I can say that they've never done that. They've never actually needed to do anything of value for their own survival. They just have to keep, spinning the agenda, the toe the line basically, and they will keep getting money.
yeah. And you look at these places like America and Australia, it's the same. I don't know how it is over where you are, probably the same, where, if you don't go off and get a degree after high school, well, you're just a slog, you're just, working for people and not doing the right thing or doing anything, of great value. But like you've just said, if you have a theory that goes against what you've been taught, you're not allowed to share it. You won't get the
Mhm.
funding.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a horror show, really. But again, the more that we talk about it and the more we expose it, the better things get. Did you want to ask anything, Billy, before I open up for questions?
Yeah, I got one question about your music because we encourage people to kind of get out in the ley lines and sing, use instruments and that sort of thing to help heal the ley lines. With your music, how and how can you explain how you use your music to possibly inspire people or like what's the basis around your music?
Well, for a lot of years now, I've done it in 432 tuning. Since about 2013, I think I started switching to that. And some of the tracks are still in 440, but most of what I've done since then has been in 432. And that was a bit of a switch. I didn't quite expect what happened when I did that. So before I was just, just a music lover. I love it. I love working on music, and so I just put love into it and try to make the best music I can imagine. Now, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it is the best that I could come up with, you know, and so I'm satisfied. Um, but so, and then we were, you know, people are having ecstatic experiences on the dance floor, and I get people writing to me all the time talking about this, you know, this experience they had, or they healed something, or they made their peace with some trauma long ago. You know, like magical things happen on dance floors, and I think it can, you know, often get overlooked. And so I really felt like I was doing healing work as a DJ, and particularly after I switched to 432, like the whole my career just sort of changed differently. I started getting invited to things that were more about healing rather than being invited to things that were more about just like raging and, you know, hedonism, right? So, and I didn't expect that. I just moved to 432 because of the mathematics. Because coming from a mathematical background, I looked at the mathematics of the modern music scale, and it's horrendous. It's like it's inaccurate. There's distortions in there. It's all like all the frequencies are like approximate numbers. But then you look at 432, and you see there's this perfect musical scale built into the natural number series. So literally given to us by God, and we're choosing to use this this other musical scale that have been made up by man for the purposes of industry. And so when I compared the mathematics, I was like, well, clearly this is a superior musical scale. So I started using that. But then this led to, as I say, much more of a healing focus of the music rather than being about like raging and partying and hedonism and so on. So yeah, so I did that for a lot of years. I played a lot of ecstatic dances, and those were some of the best gigs I ever played. You know, some people think it's all about getting up there in front of 10,000 people and everything. Honestly, those gigs I found to be horribly stressful. The best ones were when it was like 200, 250 people in a room and one DJ for the whole night. It's a very intimate experience, and people sit down and share their experiences at the end and everything, and it's much more healing. No one talks on the dance floor as well, which is just wonderful. An ecstatic dance, no one talks on the dance floor, so everything is just heard clearly. And those were some of the best gigs I ever played, and yeah, I'd love to do that kind of thing again, but I don't get many gigs anymore. But that might change in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, because I do sound engineering, and it's generally the smaller gigs, even just like birthday parties and stuff like that, are the best ones because you can like
Yeah.
interact with people, and yeah, they're the best ones.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was like trying to stipulate that I think it's better for the DJ to be on the same level as the crowd rather than elevated up on a stage like an idol. I don't like that. And you know, up on an idol and everyone's videoing the DJ and stuff like that. It's like, no, 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 put your phones away. Have the DJ on the same level as the crowd. No one talks, and just let people like dance and just, you know, feel the music and move their body. I think that's the purest way to do it, you know.
Oh, that is fantastic. Oh, I didn't even know you were doing everything in 432 hertz now. That's fantastic. So we were constantly pushing people, you know, if you want to go out into a ley line and help heal and cleanse and balance, take 432 hertz music out. But people often don't know where to find it. So that's fantastic. So we'll also link that. And speaking of which, I'll just share your info. So this is your website. Obviously, you're revamping it at present.
Yeah, so this is just a holding page, as you can see there, full new look website coming soon. Stay tuned. I'm hoping to launch it on Monday, but there's a lot. I've got a lot of new products and offerings and stuff which I'm about to launch, and yeah, I'm planning to do it like on Monday or Tuesday next week. So I'm really close to having it all finished.
Excellent.
Um,
And there's your book. Fantastic. So obviously doing well.
so yeah, you can
What's
buy the
your
book from
book
me.
about?
So, well, the book can be bought from me directly if anyone wants like a signed copy. Although, you know, postage to Australia and New Zealand is quite expensive. It's more expensive than the book. But I do signed copies if you want to buy from me directly. But it's also available on Amazon, which you'll get it sort of quicker and cheaper that way.
Sorry, I'm sort
Uh,
of panicking then, but I did get it from your link tree. So
oh yeah, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, there it is. It's yeah, my book I published in 2024 after probably two and a bit years of work on it. And really, the first half is just about breaking down modern science, pointing out all the logical fallacies and problems with the science we've been given. And then in the second half, it goes into ancient alchemy, and I try to show how it's just a superior doctrine that gives us a much better understanding of everything. So it's been going well, and it's getting translated. There's about to be a Japanese version about to hit the market, and I've got publishers in various European countries now looking to publish it as well and translate it. So yeah, it's really exciting, and I highly
Brilliant.
recommend having a read of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I definitely
fantastic.
will. And this is where you can find all Steve's stuff. So I recommend having a look at that. This website looks fabulous.
That's my Headflux website. Yeah, that's going to be updated as well next week. I'm releasing my entire body of music, so
Wow.
I got it all together. It's like 88 tracks and 12 DJ mixes, totaling over 24 hours of continuous music. So I'm going to be releasing that as a single download next week.
Oh, fantastic.
Wow.
Wow, that is
Anyway.
well, that's beautiful because that's a lot of effort and you're just giving it out for free. Well done. Thank
Well, I'm
you.
not giving it for free, but
Oh, okay. Oh, good.
no, I'm putting it together as a for sale package. Yeah.
That's
No, well,
much
it's just
better.
the music's basically been free, for a lot of years. That's the thing, it's like most people take the music for free anyway. It's kind of always been that way. But I think like gathering it all together into a single package, like 20 years of work from a single artist, it's worth something as a whole package like that. So I'm gonna that'll be a paid for download. Yeah.
Awesome. Does
Awesome. I
anybody
can
have any questions?
party for a whole day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, party nonstop for a whole day.
Any questions from anybody watching? I know it's challenging because you're obviously speaking to someone very intelligent, because I found it quite challenging getting ready for this one. I don't normally speak to people who have a physics background. I'm thinking, what am I going to ask? But does anybody have any questions? What about you, Edwina? You always ask great questions.
No questions. No, fascinating though. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stella. Oh, John's coming to save you. John.
Of course, John.
Of course, John.
Hey, how are you guys?
Yeah, good to see
And
you.
gals, good to see you.
Yeah.
Stephen, I just got one question, and you'll have to excuse my ignorance, but I play a piano and a bit of music, but I've never really put much research into it. But when you say 432 hertz and 440 hertz, now my understanding of digital music as it is now, in regard to analog recordings that were on vinyl and previous on tape. Now 440 hertz is a square wave, and 432 hertz is square wave. So
I'm not sure what do you mean it's a square wave?
well,
Just a
a
frequency.
digital signal is a 0 or a 1, so it's either on or off. So is a digital signal in music recorded as a square wave, or well, my understanding is that it is, and then the actual signal is smoothed off to make it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about the sample rate, not the
Yeah,
reference
sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So in digital music, there's a sound that's actually 44.1 kilohertz, and that's like 44,100 samples per second when the music is taken from analog into digital. So it takes 44,000 samples a second, but that's nothing to do with the reference frequency of the tuning, 440 or 432. It's a different, that's the digitization frequency rather than the tuning of the music.
Oh, okay. So when we're talking 432, or why is 440 say I've got two tuning forks, one's at 440 hertz and one's at 432. Now, can you explain why the 440 hertz wouldn't be as efficacious to humans as the 432?
Well, the difference is it's a lot to do with the mathematics, and it's actually It's actually not too complicated, but 432, if you look it up, is the most harmonic number. That it means it has a very high number of divisors. There's like 20 different numbers which divide into 432, and they're all musical numbers. They're all musically useful numbers. And so the number 432 actually has a whole number music scale just built into it by default, just in the natural number series. And so there's that. So when you tune to 432, you're aligning your music with the natural number series. But when you in 440, it's essentially it's essentially arbitrary. I mean, I'm not saying there's something particularly bad about 440. I mean, it could be 439 or 442 or something, but 432 has a very unique number with special musical properties that makes it worth using as the central frequency. And you can show this using mathematics. But then there's also equal temperament, which is the spacing between the notes, like how you calculate the rest of the note frequencies from the reference frequency. And in modern music, they use something called equal temperament, which was designed to allow bands to play songs in any key. So they wanted to be able to change the key that songs were written in, because it's like easier for the singer to sing in G than it is to sing in C, or something like that. They wanted to allow that. So they used this equal temperament system, which makes the distances between the notes inaccurate. And so if you have something like the perfect fifth, which is C and G played together, if you look at it in 440 equal temperament, you'll find there's a beating sound. There's actually a distortion. It's not perfect. The fifth is not perfect. But if you go into 432, just intonation tuning, you have a perfect fifth, perfect fourth, and there's no wobbling, no distortion. It's just a perfect solid wave. So it's just more accurate and more in resonance with the natural number series that God has given us. And I've got a book. I'm going to be launching a new book, just an ebook, 30-page ebook called The Art of Audio Alchemy next week, which will go into this in more depth. So I've got a lot of new stuff coming out next week. But does that answer your question?
Yeah. One question. Sorry, I'll let someone else ask a question. But so if a piano tuner comes to my house and tunes the piano, typically would they be tuning it to 440?
Yes, yeah. So because it was standardized, that is the standard tuning for all instruments by default. But they could tune it to 432 if you asked them, because it's the same job basically. But if you don't specify, then they will just tune it to 440. Yeah.
Because I noticed, the fellow came a couple of years ago and tuned ours, and he had a lot of trouble tuning the three strings that are tied to each note with harmonics. And I thought, how does that happen? And you just explained it quite well. So that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great questions, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? Estelle, come on, you've got something to say. No, she's shy. Well, we've hit the hour mark, so we might sort of, Thank you very much, Steve, for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
It's been really enjoyable and great to connect with you again. I need to look into your work more, the ley lines. It's definitely, since I came back from Australia, I've been looking at the world differently. Like we have a path here, like it's the nature path. It used to be a train track. They made it into a nature path. But after I saw your talk and I came back and I was looking and I could see the circular growth of the plants like over, and I realized like nothing ever grows on the path.
Yeah.
You were saying like plants don't grow on ley lines, and I know for a fact that the council aren't going around picking up weeds off this path, right? It's just like they just don't grow on the path, and the trees grow in this sort of circular, and the path like weaves like. And I've walked along this path since I was a kid, but after watching your talk, I now look at this path with like totally new eyes. And of course, whenever I see like faces in the wood and stuff like that, it's
awesome.
It's just it's really opened my mind to how much more magical this realm is. So thanks for all your great work as well. And it's been a pleasure.
Well, yeah, you come from a country where there's, you know, there's a lot of talk about fairies still. It hasn't been taken out of your folklore like it has in so many other places. Well, that's wonderful. And it sounds like that particular path, because it meanders, it's a natural earth energy line. It's still a ley line, but the controlled ones are more called the ley lines. So that's lovely. You've got a natural healthy one. So you'll get healthier walking along that track.
Yeah, I feel, I mean, it's just, yeah, I love walking along there. Always have, since the youngest age. So yeah, good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Billy, as always. And we'll have this
Thank
up
you.
soon, possibly next couple of days. All right. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
fantastic.
Thanks,
Bye.
Billy. Good to
Thank you
meet
very
you.
much, Steve.